Beneath the reality of Tamando is a far older layer of existence. Its depths go on for infinity, into unknowable spaces and dimensions that mortal eyes cannot even perceive. It is the sea of power beneath everything, that which fuels the cosmos, an eternally white-hot furnace of potency. This endless churning chasm of energy is known to those who can perceive it as the wellspring. The Kandia sometimes know it as Ta Skoturiga, and all magic in Tamando comes from within it. For the longest time, there was simply what is called the dream time, the time before reality had yet become a reality, when existence had yet to dream itself to life. For unknown eternities, this was the state of things, an ever-changing, constantly swirling, white-hot mass of infinite potential, dreaming of a day it might become something more, something real. This was the Age of the Wellspring. After time untold, eons of mystery, a sort of film formed atop the wellspring, something not quite alive, but certainly not the tumultuous sea of energy beneath it, without form or distinction, but with enough coherence to remain intact atop the wellspring itself. It was clumpy and not entirely uniform yet, but it was coming together nicely, minding its own business, the dream continuing as it slowly condensed into place. This surface did nothing worth talking about for the longest time, but, as always seems to happen in the Pan Dimensions, it did not stay idle for long. The dream time could only last for a finite period before reality awakened, and all things took form. An image of the divine was being drawn on the canvas that was the wellspring. Time went on. The divine became more consistent, more coherent. It smoothed out and covered the entirety of the wellspring's surface, an impermeable barrier to contain the mad, endless potential of the source of all magic. Like a sludge on top of a still pond, the divine grew to cover every bit of the surface, blotting out the incandescent infinity below. And so the Age of Division began. Existence, as it is known, began to form, no longer being constantly churned back into the chaos of the unbound wellspring as soon as it coalesced. The stability atop the divine allowed for new, more complex things to form. Eventually, the first life crawled from that less dangerous region just atop the wellspring. In that moment, the divine had birthed the first deities. Able to freely access the force that bore them and interact with the very stuff they were made of, the deities drugged themselves out of the divine into the space above and began to experiment with complex concepts like land and water and air and space-time. Near formless and without proper intention, these first deities followed the same rules as all life. Learn, compete, consume, proliferate, repeat. This age is known as the Blue Age. It stretched on for countless eons as the first deities invented new ways to compete with each other, birthing the first stars and worlds, developing the concepts of love and conflict, toying with the precious notions of life. Eventually, this gave way to the Dawn Age. Therein the rat race of reality truly began. Unable to agree on things, unable to decide on how the world should be, or if there should only be one, or if there should be any at all, the many original deities graduated from creating concepts to compete with one another, and actively began using the divine to strike each other down. They and they alone could directly access the film that blocks out the wellspring, and so could inspire each other, through force, to return to it. Alliances were formed as power-hungry deities banded together to force their kin back into the divine from whence they came, erasing their personalities and pushing their essence into partitioned sections of the film where they might be used to fuel the conflict evermore. When they could not work together to destroy their enemies, deities bred to create children that would grow stronger than both parents, and thereafter would so often turn against their creators and consume their power as well. Though the divine was more accessed than ever, it was a time wherein all gods lived in constant fear of violent death. Nobody could be trusted. Nothing was ever over. After billions of years of fighting and saturating all of the world, eventually divine society had to form. It was simply too much to maintain. And so began the Morning Age some 10,000 years ago. Tired of the conflict, and clearly seeing their own creations arriving on the global stage, the gods used their inherent connection with the divine to close the Dawn Age, constructing the divine bureaucracy and holding themselves in higher standards than they once had. Mortals and near-mortals would be able to access the divine through them, and through this connection to the mortal world, the many billions of deities throughout tamando would remain, and be able to guide mortals into better ways. While no singular consensus was ever reached as to what those better ways were, and deities still fight through mortals to this day, it meant that the entities of the divine no longer had to kill each other to assert dominance over one another. And it also meant that the deities would retain their overall power and no longer had need to breed. A new system would be laid down to protect them from the mistakes of the past, to protect them from themselves. The world of mortals would not dethrone their position. The gods would remain the sole dispensers of the great power that made and formed the divine. Under the divine bureaucracy, they would be the only ones the mortals could ever turn to if they desired to access the touch of magic. Or would they? While concentrated and highly morphic, the divine is explicitly not unbound chaos. Unlike the constantly churning, white-hot mass of untamed, unbound energy that is the wellspring, the divine always takes up some sort of form. However, because it is the basest of things, only coherent enough to hold complete chaos at bay, it can take many different forms when called upon. Deities use it to produce fire, alter water, create storms, or conjure natural disasters. It can take the form of a soft, multicolored healing light, or blinding white tendrils of energy that reach out to impale one's foes. Generally speaking, how the divine manifests itself depends on what is being rendered. Generally speaking, how the divine manifests itself depends on what it is being rendered through. While all manner of mortals and near-mortals use the divine, it is almost always through some form of deity, and that deity specifically flavors the manifestation of the divine to fit their portfolio. Sometimes the divine doesn't appear in any way that mortals can perceive, though all deities are naturally quite aware of the divine, and, with exception, most know instinctively how it works and what the limits of their portfolios are. Unlike in many fantasy worlds, the divine is always present, and it is only because of this that life is able to exist at all. Without the presence of the divine in all parts of tamando, the wellspring would flow free and threaten to consume everything, churning all of reality back into the white-hot depths of chaos. Only through incredible force of will and a connection to the wellspring via the gift is one able to penetrate the divine and siphon out raw magical power for themselves without divine assistance.